Hello there, you awakening wonders. Thanks for joining us for Stay Free with Russell Brand in a week that will surely go down in history, just because they all do. I think that's how they do history. They've got to keep a record of it. It's part of their job, isn't it? They archive it. They archive it. If you're watching us on YouTube, we'll be here on your channel, You Awakened Wonders, for about 15 minutes before slinking off, all wry and sly, to Rumble, the home of free speech. Why? Because we were talking about Jordan Peterson versus YouTube. We'll be delving into the Tucker and Tate, as I'm calling it lately, and we'll be having a real in-depth look at the current social media ban that the White House, through the Department of Justice, are demanding. But do you want to be censored? Do you need censorship? Are you too stupid to decide for yourself what your own moral centre might look like? And what authority structures could you ever trust? Particularly when you see these goons all lining up for a photograph. Did you see that there's the NATO, what's it called, Vilnius?
Yeah.
They discuss how well this war's not going.
That's right.
With, you know, when we're supporting Russia. I mean Ukraine. I mean Russia. I mean Ukraine. I mean Iraq. Sorry, it is confusing. Here they are doing the NATO family photo, and it's such a festival of awkwardness, although I will say Joe Biden doesn't stand out as particularly inept.
He does pretty well, actually.
Yeah, he does. He sort of stays with the herd. But they should have, and I think in our country, we go, cheese! That's what we do in Britain. I don't know what you do in America. Like, maybe you sort of choose. What do you lot say in a photograph to sort of create a moment? Because a photograph is an acknowledgement of a unified place and moment in time. For this moment, we are NATO. Look at them standing here all shifty and feckless. Let's have a look at the footage. Rishi Sunak, that's our one. That geezer there next to Biden. Then there's this poor glum character. Are you surprised about how few of them you know who they are? Well,
yeah, but I tell you what, that stage is having to get bigger and bigger every year, isn't it?
Right, another one in NATO. You made a deal. You told us no more people. Come on, another person, you're in NATO. I don't even have a country. Come on. Illinois, Russia. Join us. Get involved. But I am from Russia. Now you can come in. Come and join us. You'll love this.
Your Excellencies, for the family photo, we would invite you to look in the central camera for 8 seconds.
His face, he touched his face. Nervous, liar. Did you see Trudeau?
Yeah, Trudeau was on the end.
Was he? He won't like that. He won't like that, Trudeau. He sees himself very much at the centre, doesn't he, Trudeau? Which do you recognise? Tell us in the chat who you recognise. Press the red button on the screen. Let us know which ones you know.
Thank you.
Macron. Is that Macron?
Yeah,
he's annoyed.
Macron,
I'm annoyed by all of them, just by looking at him. Look at our one, trying too hard. Our one's Rishi Sunak, geezer, red tie at the front.
We should turn this into a game of Guess Who.
Guess who's in charge of what? Yeah, click, 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 click. You're going down, you're going down. Is your one senile? Yep. Down you go. Does your one have strong affiliations with the WEF? Click, 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 down they all go. Does yours sort of talk about liberal values and like how everyone should be tolerated, then censor basically everything that anyone says? That's not convenient.
From Mattel. Guess Who? NATO, the ever-expanding game.
Oh, lovely. Hey, you can't play that near the Russian borders. Come on, who's to say? They'll like it. Just make them put up with it. Let's have a look at the rest of these nerds. Very well. No, they just all wander off. They all just wander off like a cluster of Bidens.
Well, exactly.
That's the real cluster bomb. This little cluster F word.
Got those cluster bombs to work out, haven't they? Got a few deals to do.
Right, how are we going to justify that a couple of years ago, or a year ago, in fact, we said that if Russia used cluster bombs, they would be criminals, and now we're going to sell Ukraine cluster bombs because it's necessary, and we've got no choice. How do they do that? Blinken says Ukraine would be defenseless without cluster bombs. I suppose the only way you can justify a cluster bomb is by saying that to not have cluster bombs would be worse than having. No matter how bad something is, if not having it would be worse, then you've almost got no choice to do it. This is the Orwellian neuro-linguistic programming hypnotic state that we're being invited to live in. Secretary of State Antony Blinken on Tuesday defended Biden administration's decision to arm Ukraine with widely banned cluster munitions and have a devastating impact on civilians. The US is providing Ukraine with cluster munitions in the form of 155mm artillery shells. Blinken said, without the cluster bombs, Ukraine would be defenseless because the US and NATO are running out of regular ammunition. Didn't you think about this when you get it?
Right.
I'll tell you what happened there. I'll tell you what you've done is you've gone to war with Russia. Russia, who don't lose wars because Russia are dangerous, mad, hard people that just go on and on and on, as Napoleon found out, as Hitler found out, and as Ukraine. Like, listen, of course it's been a criminal invasion. The slaughter of Ukrainian people in this ludicrous counter-offensive ought to be ended at once. I'm not a military expert, but I listen to people who are, like Jeffrey Sachs, who told me that this is what was going to happen, told us the reasons why it happened, infringement on former NATO territories. And while them dickwads are standing around at NATO, blinking at the camera, staring for 8 seconds, people are dying at a rate of 1,000 a day.
Exactly that. And this is like a candid admission that this is not sustainable, that this war isn't sustainable. But then when you have Joe Biden saying, we'll keep backing you for as long as it takes, and then last month, Antony Blinken, the same person, dismissing calls for a ceasefire, saying the US will focus its efforts on arming Ukraine and not attempting to bring the war to a negotiated settlement, then you're like, well, hang on, what is it? Is it that we need to keep supplying these war criminal weaponry because they're running out of ammunition? Or is it we're just going to keep doing this for as long as it takes to annihilate everyone?
Do you remember when Trump did the CNN town hall that they immediately regretted doing, and the interviewer kept pushing to say, who do you want to win? Who do you want to win? What? Is this a schoolyard scrap? Or is this a geopolitical conflict which could take us to a nuclear war? And what did Trump keep saying? Trump kept saying, I just want the war to stop. I want people to stop dying. I watched that clip again recently, and I thought, wow, like a little while ago, if this was a verified figure of the liberal establishment, like if that was Obama saying that, you'd go, of course, that's the issue. Of course, that's the issue.
Well, they would have had a standing ovation as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I have another Nobel Peace Prize. Go on, get that down there. Go and give the Yemen a good drubbing from the sky, for God's sake. It's outrageous. It's got out of control. Like later this week, we're speaking to the Sound of Freedom people, and we've reached the point where cluster bombs are good 1 minute, bad the next minute. The cluster bomb, how do you know if it's good or bad? It depends who it's blowing up. It's become difficult to know what the truth is. It's become difficult to sustain one central cultural space. A film like Sound of Freedom, criticised because of QAnon affiliations, but there's nothing about QAnon in the film. This is something I'll be discussing with an interview that you'll see soon between me and Saga and Jetty that you'll enjoy.
I mean, also, if you're going to criticise a film for its affiliations, for the people that are involved in either starring in it or making it, then you're going to have to do a lot of examining of people in Hollywood.
Hey, these Miramax movies don't look so good after the Weinstein revelations. What about American Sniper, which was like, you know, as the brilliant Scottish comedian Frankie Boyle said, was Star Wars from the perspective of a stormtrooper. A really difficult time, and I suppose that this is something we have to look at as well. After our, we're going to call it a world exclusive, groundbreaking interview with Tucker Carlson, Tucker Carlson has released his conversation with Andrew Tate. And again, I suppose this is one of those conversations that brings censorship to the fore. Where do you stand on this? Where do you stand on the subject of Andrew Tate? I guess you're going to find some people that think that he's sort of a vital and invigorating voice in the culture war space, and some people that think they don't like Andrew Tate, and particularly with these outstanding allegations, I suppose these are part of the conversation. But until there's a judicial conclusion around those matters, I suppose these are something where views have to be suspended. Maxima Titus 444 says she don't align with his views. Blessed Old Bird says he's a bit rude. But we had a look at some aspects of the conversation, and it seems to me like these are the kind of conversations that culture has an obligation to have. How are we going to progress without having them, I suppose?
I think the thing is, as well, is actually one of the things he does mention in this interview with Tucker is how the culture war has been used. And I think that's something we can all agree on, that these matters are used in a way to keep us distracted and talking about things that aren't as important necessarily, that are important in their own way, but aren't necessarily as important as, for example, cluster bombs. You know, so you'll get the media talking about Andrew Tate for whatever reasons that is, whilst not reporting on the fact that we're sending cluster bombs and that was constituted as a war crime.
Kip1 says on our Locals chat, and if you're watching us on Rumble, why don't you join us over here on Locals? It's a fantastic conversation. This person said, I find Andrew Tate a bit arrogant, but I don't think he should be censored. Natasha Lee says, Tate does understand the CIC, but I think he may play it up to his advantage. I suppose that where we are now is it's necessary to be able to have conversations. It's necessary to have moral authority somewhere in cultural life, whether that's in media, the electoral process, or the judiciary. We're experiencing a time where there is a cataclysmic loss of trust in our institutions. And that is no doubt in part because of bureaucrats posing like mob bosses. You perhaps have heard of the EU Commissioner, Thierry Breton. He may look like your grandma. He may look like a well-groomed Colonel Sanders, but by God, he talks like Don Corleone. He's a man that struck terror into the heart of Elon Musk when he said that if social media platforms don't comply with EU edicts, they will be fined a significant sum from their annual turnover. This is how censorship goes global. This is how censorship becomes legal. This is how the kind of conversations that we have will become shut down. We're talking about the advent now of digital currencies. We're talking about censorship at a global level. We're talking about a global situation where bureaucratic bodies who have never been elected will have the ability to censor you using your money to shut you down and then control your access to currency. This social credit score dystopia that was dreamed of as a little more than a Black Mirror plot 18 months ago is now being legislated for. It's being bought into your reality. And what strikes me, Gareth, in particular about our man Thierry Breton is the sort of provocative language, the aggressive language used. We will shut you down if you don't comply. When did government officials start talking to the people that pay them like that?
Yeah, exactly. And what he's doing at the moment, and basically when Macron recently, who we literally just saw enjoying his time at NATO, has threatened to shut down social media for what he says is highlighting irresponsibly footage of rioting, or you could say protesting. It depends how you want to frame that. And so Macron's threat was to shut down social media, and what Breton has now said is that will be something that under these new EU laws will be able to do.
So the French people are protesting because they're unhappy about the French administration. They're unhappy that they're not able to vote on significant issues. They're unhappy that France appears to be run by globalist corporate interests. One piece of language I saw around it is we can't have a situation where people are rioting, where people are killing other people, where people are burning cars. You could see how rhetorically the idea of killing and burning starts to be equated and assimilated into the idea of dissent and protest. Tell us how you feel about that. Use your free speech while you can. If you're watching us on Rumble, click the red button and join us on Locals. If you're watching us on YouTube, you're going to have to join us in a second because we're going to talk about Jordan Peterson's recent ban and his publication of the email that informed him of why he has been censored. And let us know how you feel about this. Let us know how you feel that increasingly it seems that platforms like this are going to be regulated, legislated by unelected government officials. In the case of YouTube, a platform I love, if you're one of our 6.5 million awakening wonders, let me reiterate my love for you and my gratitude towards the platform. But it has to be said that when it comes to matters related to COVID and the pandemic, they still use WHO guidelines to this day to inform their own community guidelines. The WHO, as you know, are lobbying for the ability to impose legislation on your country without electoral process, to extract 5% of your nation's health budget into their coffers. These are not normal times. The idea that we were moving towards a new world order with a centralized globalist authority that was unelected and immovable is becoming evident. It's emerging from the fugue of bureaucracy that's clearly being sprayed and splayed now.
Yeah, exactly. What you said there, Ross, the word used by Breton there was revolt. When there is hateful content that calls, for example, for revolt, but also calls for killing and burning of cars, they will be required to delete the content. Obviously, revolt is something that is very different from killing and the burning of cars, but it's being conflated into the same thing. Just to let you know of the kind of very real consequences of this, Breton has also revealed that in response to this, Mark Zuckerberg, CEO of Meta, as we know, has hired an additional 1,000 censors as a result of these new laws.
Well, they're booking in more sensors now.
Has hired an additional 1,000 more sensors. So again, when we were talking about threads recently and about the way in which people are already being blacklisted and grey-listed, this is happening. And when they're talking about it being a more friendly place and a place that, you know, we can all get along, which isn't the case with Twitter, what that does mean is manifesting here is 1,000 new sensors have joined Meta as a result.
They want you to be neutered, devoid of vigor. They want you to prize congeniality, conviviality, friendliness above vitality. All of us would agree that a friendly, congenial atmosphere is beneficial, that we should be speaking to one another in good faith. But the answer to that is not to create more censorship and more authority. It's to recognize that it cannot be achieved through censorship, that there will always be a degree of hateful language, because do you know what? Human beings have hatred within us. We cast a shadow. The light casts a shadow. The solution that they are presenting to the problem of being human is to the opposite of what's required, the opposite of devolution, the opposite of decentralization, the opposite of more democracy, more authority, less personal ownership. What they're trying to create is a world where we are impotent cells, devoid of personal autonomy. That surely can't be the solution, but it's certainly the solution they're heading towards, even at the level of finance. One of the few areas where we have control over our lives is our ability to control our own currency. And remember, when cryptocurrencies were launched, these cryptocurrencies are dangerous, they're bad for the environment, they're being used by lunatics, conspiracy theories, the way they talk about a film like Sound of Freedom, which I've yet to watch, but you're going to love my interview with Jim Caviezel and Tim Ballard, a fantastic conversation with them. Oh, this film, it's QAnon, it's, you know, I don't know, man. I don't know how they're packaging loss of freedom as somehow advantageous to the people that are directly affected by it. Let's have a look at this report on the emergence of the digital dollar, which right now 50% of the world's countries are either introducing or piloting. This isn't pie in the sky. This is stuff that's being brought about soon. It's coming to a bank account like yours very soon. And the same way the Canadian truckers had their bank account shut down, that could be any one of us next. And the old adage, if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to lose, well, that's going to become less and less relevant because you don't know what you've got to hide, because they can change the rules whenever they want, just like that. Let's have a look at this on the mainstream.
Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell told the House Financial Services Committee in March that the Fed had already begun testing a digital dollar.
So what we're doing is experimenting in kind of early stage experimentation. How would this work? Does it work? What's the best technology? What's the most efficient?
Just like paper dollars, a central bank digital currency, or CBDC, would be issued by the Federal Reserve. Those pushing for it say it would have several advantages over physical money. They say it could be used to fight inflation because the Fed would have more direct control over the money supply. It could speed up transaction payments and help fight money laundering.
Convenience, fighting against crime. Let me know in the comments if you have seen these arguments used again and again to advance models of centralized authority. A total of 130 countries representing 98% of the global economy are now exploring digital versions of their currencies, with almost half in advanced development, pilot or launch stages, a closely followed study shows. This is what's happening in our country, the UK, Gareth, and we were fascinated when we learned this earlier. A digital version of the British pound, one of the greatest currencies the Lord ever did create, may feature a way to verify the holder's age and citizenship status, potentially smoothing the purchase of alcohol and tobacco and transactions with government agencies. So, of course, anyone would accept that they don't want children smoking or drinking alcohol. But I like the point you made earlier, Gareth, about how a digital currency could just be a replica of physical currency, and yet it isn't. What do you think's happening there?
Well, I just think, where does this stop? You know, first of all, it's like, okay, it's going to hold your age. Okay, my age, I guess, fine. My citizenship status. Okay, where are we going with that now? Right, now we want your health details.
When did you wash your winky? When did you?
But, you know, we've talked about vaccine passports.
That was actually just my question.
Oh, I see.
That's not the digital currency.
It was this morning.
Well done. That's pretty good. That's a bloody good routine. And you can put that on your new Britcoin.
I do that every day.
That's just standard. So you've got nothing to hide. You have nothing to hide.
Thanks, Ross. No, but obviously, a lot of the controversy around vaccine passports at the time was, what else? Where does this lead to? What other things? Basically, we get into the point where the government are going to know kind of everything about us just from what we spend. And also what we were talking about earlier is that now the danger with this is that they're not going to have to go to corporations anymore. They're not going to have to say, what are these people spending their money on? Are they attending a Donald Trump rally? What are they buying here? They literally will have direct access to that now.
Free speech is being equated with hate speech. Privacy is being equated with criminality. The ability for private and commercial entities, vast in stature and size, for their ability to track and observe your private transactions is now being given to the government. The government, that whether you voted for them or not, they're here to stay. I don't remember handing over that degree of authority. Isn't it time for a massive renegotiation when it comes to our relationship with the state? Don't all of us really at this point want as little government as possible, the maximum amount of democracy, for there only to be regulatory funding when it comes to the necessary municipal things that we can share in as a community? Are we going to leave YouTube now? I've just got the message. We've got to leave YouTube because we're going to talk about censorship now. We're going to continue to talk about the control of currency, but we're also going to talk about the Jordan Peterson hate speech strike and the taking down of his content from YouTube. So even though we love you guys, you 6.5 million awakening wonders, you've got to click the link in the description. Join us over in the other space so we can speak freely and free, most of all, from hate. See you in a second.